Is Wednesday, May 16th. This is an interview with Judge Brammer. This is Elizabeth Townsend, and it's for Dima Saro's Preparing for Lives in the Law project. Let's begin with the beginning question, and that is, how did you decide to go to law school? What made you want to do that?
I didn't want to be an accountant, which is what my father was trying to lead me toward. My father was a lawyer, and his father before him was a lawyer, and he thought that his kids might want to do something else. He was a very good lawyer, but he wasn't all that satisfied, I don't think, with what he did. And while I was a decent student in the accounting courses, I wasn't all that interested in or attracted to accountancy. And I took a business law class from a local lawyer in Tucson by the name of Marshall Jones. He was an adjunct professor in the business college. My junior year in the spring, I had business law from him, and he just made it very interesting. How business law can be made interesting, I'm not quite sure, but for me, he did make it interesting. So that led me then to apply to be admitted to this law school and to take the law school admissions test the following fall. And I got admitted and decided to come here.
Why do you think your dad wasn't satisfied?
Well, I don't know. He never said that he wasn't, but there must have been something about what he was doing. He mostly did real estate and wrote wills and did tax planning for people. It was principally an office practice. He was not a trial lawyer. And maybe he thought it was not glamour never entered into his consideration of things, because he didn't really care what other people thought about that, but maybe he felt that he could have had a different area of practice maybe, but that he wasn't really satisfied with it. I'm just not quite sure.
And you said your grandfather also practiced law?
He did. He was a trial judge this was back in the Midwest in Iowa. He was a trial judge for a while, but mostly he was a lawyer. He died fairly young. He was in his late 50s, early 60s when he died.
So when you came to law school having a family with a background of law, did you have a sense of what law was, or did you?
Not really. Didn't have much understanding of it other than what I had learned in the business law course. I hadn't really been exposed to much. We children of the 50s were fairly sheltered. All we had to worry about was nuclear holocaust hanging over our head all the time. So I really didn't know what I was getting into, and I didn't prepare myself particularly well for law studies, because you do have to study law. And in undergraduate school, while I did study some, I didn't have a very good work ethic, so it was a rude awakening coming to law school.
In what way was it?
Well, I had to read a lot, which I didn't mind, because I enjoy and did enjoy then reading. But I had to really study a lot, spend a lot of time on it. It didn't, I guess, come real easy, so I had to really work at it, and that was something new for me. But I learned how to do it.
And what were your favorite classes?
Oh.
Did you have any that stick out in your mind, or ones you hated?
No, I didn't really. Well, as much as anybody can like law, any aspect of law school, I think all the courses were pretty much the same. All of the law teachers that I had were pretty old school, and those were the days when they admitted everybody that came. We started with nearly 300 people in my class, and we had 122 that graduated, so there was a bit of a winnowing process throughout the time. There was no grading on a curve. You either passed or you failed, and everybody could pass or everybody could fail, and a lot of people failed.
Did that make it a stressful situation, or did it not bother you too much?
I wasn't particularly concerned about that. I was just worried about whether or not I would be able to cut the mustard. I wasn't worried how I was doing relative to the rest of my classmates.
I asked Professor Ayers this question, and I'll ask you, because sometimes when people look at people down the road, they look like they're perfect. And I wanted to know if you felt like things were easy and perfect for you in law school. He had said that that wasn't the case for him, but
Well,
I mean,
it's easy to look back after a passage of a considerable amount of time and forget about all the hard work and the strain of study and taking exams and all that kind of stuff. I don't think it was particularly easy for me. I was very fortunate that I was married right before I started law school, and my wife worked on campus, and she was a great help and support system, so we could come to school together and eat lunch together, and then we'd go home and have dinner, and then she'd do things around the house, and I would come back to the library and study till the library closed and then go home. And so other than studying and having to worry about whether we were going to pay the bills or not, it was a pretty carefree time. It doesn't really prepare you for practice of law. It's very different.
in what way?
In almost every way. I've heard over the last probably generation of law students so concerned about the stress of law school and all the pressures and so forth. Well, in my experience, all that does is get you ready for the real world. And if a person doesn't like stress and doesn't like pressure, then being a lawyer probably is not what a person should be doing, unless they're going to handle only one case and not worry about making a living. It's enjoyable, but it's difficult, the practice of law. So if a law student believes that it will be much easier after graduation, I think that person's in for a serious surprise.
What do you think the law school should be doing here? There's a lot of talk about that there should be more practice-oriented classes versus theory-oriented classes. Should it be so different?
Well, law school probably is not structured as well as it could be to prepare people to practice law. But in the time that's allowed, the preparation, the complete preparation probably is not possible. I think it's very important for law schools to teach the basics of the core subject matter of the law. Legal principles, legal theory, jurisprudence, and also how to find the law, how to do research and figure out answers to problems. And it was my experience in law school that the law school did a pretty good job of that. I think the courses that we were offered and took grounded us well in the basics of the legal subjects, and did teach us how to find the answers to legal questions, do legal research, analysis, those kinds of things. As far as the practical side of law, we had no I'm not quite sure what they're called now. There's a whole bunch of them.
Like the clinics?
Clinics. We had no clinics. The only practical subject matter that we had was a trial practice course. There was an appellate advocacy course in, I believe, second semester of our first year, and there was a voluntary moot court program that went through first, second, and third year. And there was a trial practice course available in our third year. But aside from that, all the practicalities of the law that one would pick up would be through private work outside the law school. There were a couple of law professors, as I recall, that engaged students to assist with legal research. They were writing books or law review articles or something like that, and they got help with those things from some students, but very few. And there were also very few clerkships out in the community. And those of us who were fortunate enough to be able to do that to have a clerking experience in the community. I think that that's where we learned our practical stuff. There was a lawyer in town by the name of Ashby Lose who just recently passed away, who taught an office practice course in the summer. It was a one-unit course, as I recall, and I took it along with several others, and there were a lot of practical things that you learned in that course, but it wasn't really a hands-on doing things. Oops, I made a mistake here, now how do I get myself out of it kind of a thing. It was still pretty academic. So if law school were to be changed in any way, it should add some well, I suppose through the clinics it has some practical experiences. I've only had a bit of experience with some of the clinical students, with a few of them, and the work that I saw from them was quite good. One sticks out in my mind. After I left practice and went on the Court of Appeals, we had a juvenile case where I think some students from the clinic here at the university represented one of the parties, and we wrote a paper that wrote one of the briefs that was really quite good.
So when you graduated, did you do a clerkship right after graduation?
Yes, I did.
And what was that experience like?
I clerked for the court that I now serve on for a judge by the name of John Malloy, who still is with us and is still practicing law. And it was very much unlike the clerking experiences I'd had for private firms, for legal firms, while I was in law school. So I was learning lots of different things, and I think what I learned from that experience was how I now use the clerks that I engage to help me. There were things about the clerkship that I enjoyed a great deal, and there were some that frustrated me, probably because I would rather have been the judge than the law clerk, but I was also a complete novice. I really didn't know much of anything, and so it was a nice transition from law school to the real world, and I would recommend it to anybody who is interested in taking a little time before they jump into the fire of legal practice.
What kind of things did you do as a clerk, or what was your?
A lot of research. Judge Malloy would would draft his decisions and leave holes for me to fill in to find support, legal support for the positions and statements that he was taking and making. And he would occasionally ask me to draft decisions, which I did, and then I would have to reason through how the case should be resolved. And so that was a good learning experience, I thought. It prepared me for, I think, going on and doing other things.
Did you ever have a situation where, when you had to fill in one of those spaces, that you found that what you found was contrary to what he wanted to support?
There were some times. It's difficult for me to remember that far back, I have to tell you. But I'm sure there were times when the position that he wanted to state was perhaps not the majority view. Judge Malloy was a very interesting and very bright, still is, man. When he left law school, he went into the service in World War II, and when he came out, before he practiced law, he sat down and read the Arizona reports from volume 1 to whatever it was at that time, to learn, to kind of reacquaint himself with the law. I think that's pretty unique in my experience. Obviously, there weren't as many volumes of the Arizona reports as there are now, but there were a good many of them. So he had a pretty good grounding in the law. He had been a Superior Court judge for many years, and he'd been a very able lawyer for many years, so he was very knowledgeable. So there wasn't a lot that he would say in those drafts that really wasn't Correct.
And how is it different from what you do with your clerks?
I try to give my clerks more freedom to create the document than just to react to a template that I have put together. I try to talk to the clerks about what the case is about and what the direction it should go, and then I ask them to prepare a decision, draft a decision like you think it should be given what we've talked about and where it needs to go. Shape the issues, or take the issues that the parties bring to us, state the facts, make sure you got them correct, find out what our standard of review is, because we have to review what the trial court did, and then apply that standard of review to the issues and to the facts and come to some kind of a conclusion. Let's see what it looks like. And thus far that's worked pretty well.
Do they stick to what they have in terms of like the record that's been created, or do you have them do additional research? Or
Well, we can't go outside the factual record, but and we are limited to those issues that the parties have legitimately raised. We try never to reach out and decide a case on an issue that the parties have not raised unless it is jurisdictional. And we have an obligation to examine always our jurisdiction, whether that issue is raised or not. But we're not bound to simply read the cases that the parties have cited to us. We're able to do research on our own, and if we find a whole bunch of cases that are on point that seem to have been missed by the parties, then, and if they appear to be of some interest and persuasion, then we oftentimes use them.
And what makes a good clerk? What kind of, I mean, are there different kinds of good clerks, or are there common qualities?
When I started out in the practice of law in a firm, I was the first associate in a firm that had been formed a couple of months before I started with them. So I was the only associate. And when it came time to hire more people, because our little firm was growing, my senior partner and I, who were responsible for acquiring new legal talent, made the decision that we would never hire anybody that wasn't smarter than we were, because it wouldn't make sense to hire people that are stupider than we were, because there weren't many of them. So I've tried to do that with law clerks. I've tried to hire bright people who are personable and have the people skills to be able to sit down and have a conversation, but have interests that go beyond the law. People that have some breadth to them. And those folks typically are able to take a problem and turn it around and figure it out.
Do you think grades are a main measurement of how bright someone is in terms of that kind of position?
Well, not necessarily, but it's been my experience that over the years, generally, that people who do better in law school will usually do better in the practice. But there are plenty of exceptions to that rule. So while I do try to find people who have had good scholastic experiences in law school and hire from within that group of people, I'm certainly not naive enough to think that those are necessarily going to be always the best folks that are available.
Why do you think law review or law journal has been so important that you know?
I've gone full circle with regard to that. Maybe I've gone 570 degrees, or however many it is, 540. When I was in law school, I wrote for the Law Review, and after I got out of law school and was hiring people and counseling people who were still in law school and were working for us, I suggested to some of them that maybe the law review was not the best experience they could have, but maybe that they should get out and do clerking work so that they could get some hands-on experience and find out what being a lawyer is really like, to find out if that's really what they want to do. Sitting around and checking footnotes necessarily is not necessarily the best way to decide if you want to be a lawyer. But as I've gotten to the position where I have to read an awful lot of written product from lawyers, I find that many lawyers write so poorly that any kind of a writing experience that will improve that is positive in my judgment. It is very unfortunate that some of the people who are practicing law and representing folks in court simply can't convey lucid thoughts in writing, and they can't logically present a position on behalf of their clients. Many folks have access to word processing, computer equipment and so forth, and they don't even use the spell checker. We get lots of things that are misspelled, the syntax is wrong, the punctuation is bad, and while the appearance of a brief or a written product shouldn't necessarily affect one's or the reader's impression of the content, it invariably has some effect. And usually there's a pretty high correlation between lousy spelling and lousy content. People need to pay attention to what they produce. I tried to have a rule when I was practicing that nothing that went out the door was going to have a mistake in it that I knew about. Obviously, we all make mistakes, and I make a zillion of them, but I tried to fix them before things went out the door, because not only did it reflect poorly on me and my law firm if I put something that was a shoddy product in the stream of commerce, but it also was not very good for my client. And that was the more important of the issues. So we were getting paid a fair amount of money to represent these people and to do it well. And I don't think that's changed any. I think the lawyers still try to get paid for what they do, and should. But they shouldn't get paid much if they don't do a very good job. And I have a feeling that's not always the case.
So what do you think the writing program here could do to help?
I don't know, because I don't know what the writing program is like here.
Well, okay, let's try it a different way. What kind of, is it grammar? Is it learning the logic of how you should, sometimes, I'm not sure how they keep changing the program here, but sometimes it focuses on how to draft particular kinds of documents, that it's teaching them that, as opposed to focusing on, the writing teacher I had here just focused on grammar and structure of arguments, and we didn't do anything that was about, it wasn't about putting that in particular form. Do you see any, is writing, or does it change from form to form?
I think there are several different parts of the problem. I don't think that law school is a place where people should learn the English language. Unfortunately, many come very poorly grounded in the language when they get to law school. They get processed through some kind of high school program, whether it's public or private, go to some kind of a college program where English is, or where language facility is not really the currency of the realm. And so it's very difficult for a law school to make up that lost ground. So if someone comes to law school with poor English skills, this probably is not the place to remedy that situation. Although, I took a course, I can't remember the name of it, I think it was the second semester of my first year at law school, and we had a weekly spelling test. I don't know whether that was good or bad, but it's pretty interesting to see how poorly many lawyers spell. But that's one issue. The the technical facility with the language, being able to spell, to get the right tenses, to get a topic sentence in your paragraph, and to make sure that you've got some flow within it. But the second problem is being able to logically and sequentially and persuasively present the information. And that's something that probably the law school has the ability to work on, and where it can have an impact, I think, on people's abilities, or at least starting down the right road. These are skills that get honed over many years of use, and some people write very well from the get-go, and some get very good over a period of time by continuing to write. Many lawyers are so busy that they don't have time to refine and hone as they might like to the written product that they produce. That's unfortunate, but it's a fact of life, and clients can't afford to pay their lawyers to sit around for hours on end trying to make sure that the product is Pulitzer quality.
Let me ask you one more question about this writing stuff, and then we'll move on. In terms of your own, how you work with your clerks and the product that you produce, is there a particular routine in terms of how many drafts that you go through, or sort of do you put it all together, or I mean, it's kind of your own writing style. Some people, they're nearly perfect after the sentence. They write slowly, and it's nearly perfect by the end, or they go through lots of drafts. Sort of what your own personal style is in terms of working.
Depends on, for me, the particular situation. Sometimes it takes a few drafts, sometimes it takes a lot of drafts, and that has something to do with the complexity of the case, making sure that all the issues are covered and that they're covered adequately and correctly. Sometimes you change your mind on how things are going because you try to write it and it just doesn't work out that way. It doesn't make sense, or you're just not satisfied with it. So there is no real cookie cutter approach to how it gets accomplished, but the product is a result of a process that has a start and has an end, and the size of the middle varies depending upon the project itself.
When you write something, have you already made your decision, or is writing part of the process of deciding, or have you sort of figured out what you want and then put it into a writing form, or is it a sort of more complex than that?
Sometimes after I read the briefs, I have a pretty good idea of where I think the case should come out and how the issue should be decided. And so starting to write it that way sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Sometimes going through the analysis and finding the cases to support the position, and understanding the technicality, for lack of a better word, of the various positions, sometimes changes the outcome. And so oftentimes the writing is the process of decision making. Several times cases will appear to be so obvious, the result appears to be so obvious, and once in the middle of it, it becomes very unclear. Although when we put out a decision, we try to make it clear. Sometimes it was pretty difficult to get to that place.
Do you ever get stuck?
Sometimes. And then you just kind of go get a glass of water, walk around, leave it overnight, go talk to some folks, talk to clerks, talk to other judges. We've got some staff attorneys with quite a bit of experience that are permanent court employees. We go talk to them and say, well, here's what I've got, here's the issue, here's the law. It seems to want to go this way, but I want it to go this way, and I can't make it happen.
Has writing always come easy to you, or is it a struggle? Or is it just part of your job?
It's been such a part of what I have done for so many years that I don't know if it's come easy or I just do it because I have to do it. I don't know that writing was always easy, and I don't know that it's easy now, but it is something that I can do without being scared to death that, oh golly, I've got to write something. I spent so many years creating documents and writing opinion letters and corresponding with clients and other lawyers that I've done a lot of writing in my day, much of which I'm sure I'd like never to see again. It would probably be very embarrassing, but as I said earlier in our conversation, learning how to do those things is a working process throughout your professional life. You hopefully continue to build your skills and improve.
This is great. Okay, we're going to switch topics.
Okay.
We're going to go back to the beginning, the practice. You had said that you wanted to talk a little bit about small firm experience and also beginning to practice. I didn't know if you have any specific, or I can ask you a question.
You can ask me questions if you'd like to try to.
Well, where did you go after you clerked? What did you do?
After my clerking experience with Judge Malloy, I went to work as an assistant city attorney for the city of Tucson and prosecuted misdemeanors in city court for a few months. Stop sign violations, public intoxication, driving under the influence, shoplifting, improper left turns, speeding, all those heinous offenses, some of which are pretty bad and some of which, some of the offenses I prosecuted are no longer on the books. Some of them, such as I think vagrancy or something like that, has been ruled unconstitutional since I convicted some people of that offense. So in July of 1968, I went to work for a law firm which had just recently been formed by Ivo DiConcini, his son Dennis, and John McDonald. They started the firm in May of 1968, and I was hired on as an associate to start in July, and I did. And it was, since I knew no different, was an experience that I really enjoyed because I got to do practically everything. Not only got to do, I had to do everything. I ran the copier. I'd go file stuff in the courthouse. I'd make sure that the copier toner was in the machine. As a matter of fact, the first copy machine we had wasn't even a Xerox machine. It was some other kind of strange copying machine. It was a little unruly. We did some appellate work, and I was the person that copied the briefs and bound them and went and filed them with the clerk. And in my later years of practice, we had folks in the office who were much more adept and certainly less highly compensated than lawyers to do that kind of work. But when we were starting out, lawyers didn't charge very much. We sure didn't make very much. And the secretaries were often more valuable than we because they had to prepare this stuff. We didn't have word processors or things, so typing was done with carbon paper, and so when they made mistakes, it was a very time-consuming process to create those things. So they didn't have the time to step away and do other tasks. It was very tedious being a legal secretary for many years. So I learned lots about the courthouse. I got to know the people in the clerk's office and the various judges and their secretaries, because I'd have to go take papers in to get orders to show cause scheduled and find times to do things. There was no public defender in those days, so every Tuesday morning we'd wander over to the assignment judge's chambers, and at 9 o'clock they'd call the arraignment of all the people who were charged with crimes, and they'd appoint people to represent them and to defend them. And so I did that for a couple of years to supplement what I did. And I learned an awful lot. Most of the law that I practiced has been changed since then. And the corporate law, the probate law, the bankruptcy law, domestic relations law, it's all been changed. So fortunately I don't have to practice that anymore. All I have to do is read it and try to understand it.
So when people say people always sort of focus on the big firms, but they don't. A lot of people don't talk about the small firms, and that there are benefits for students who want to go to a small firm or to choose that out. That it seems from your experiences that there's a lot to be had there.
I was fortunate to have some senior lawyers who I could go to for advice and who could guide me and help me with all the things I didn't know, which were legion. And a young lawyer thrown out into the practice is a dangerous critter, because we know just enough to be truly dangerous and not nearly enough to be competent in most areas. So lawyers new to the practice who hang up their shingle and practice as a solo, it's a pretty rough road. You are your own boss, and you don't have to answer to anybody but your clients, but the answers that you give them better be pretty good. Otherwise, you're probably not going to do the best job for them, and they get angry. Clients get very angry, and they're entitled to when you don't do a good job for them. So firms of any size have several amenities that solo practitioners don't have, and that's people to bounce things off of and exchange information and answer questions.
And you wanted to talk about growing a law firm. Was that the same law firm that you started at?
Yes, I stayed with the same firm from the time I started private practice till I stopped. And so from 1968 to 1997, I was in the same firm. And it changed substantially over that time. We moved locations many times, added a lot of lawyers, lost a lot of lawyers, had locations in Tucson and Phoenix. We had, I think, maybe 3 different groups of lawyers in the Phoenix office that comprised that office. And it was a lot of fun. It was very enjoyable. Watching the practice grow and watching the lawyers mature to do the legal work for the clients. And I was one of those people who was maturing doing that. It was very enjoyable. Not everybody gets to do that. Matter of fact, very few people get to do that. I was very fortunate in my professional career, such as it was, to be able to experience going from a really small firm atmosphere to a quasi-larger firm atmosphere. It wasn't a very big firm. We probably only had maybe 30 lawyers in the full firm at its largest. But it seemed like a big deal to me.
And how did it change when you were in the firm and you were there from the beginning, so there was probably a sense of camaraderie or growing something together.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a sense that I think sometimes people feel that it's sort of the collective versus the individual. I mean, did you have a sense of like trying to get your own career ahead, or just working, or I mean, how should students look at when they go out into the world in terms of what they're supposed to be doing and sort of their own sort of, I don't know, that's not a very good question, but do you know what I mean? I mean, there's a sense of like making partner, getting ahead, being the shining star versus sort of what's good for the firm as a whole. And are those the same things or different things?
My perspective may be a hair different because the vantage point from which I started was that I was the only person who wasn't a partner in the firm. So there was no place for me to go but up. And so I didn't worry so much about my professional advancement within the firm, because I assumed, and I was told, that if I did well, I would be compensated accordingly, and not just with money, but with growth within the firm. When I was hired, I was told that at the end of 6 months, I would get a $50 a month raise, whether no matter what I was doing, just because I'd been there for 6 months. So I figured if I worked really hard, the firm would benefit, and by dint of that, I would benefit as well. So I stayed 6 months, and I got my $50 a month raise, and then went on from there.
When you're in, you said earlier that when you were in law school that your wife worked on campus and you had lunch together, and it sounded like you were able. I mean, that you spent nice time together. That there wasn't that sometimes people don't see their family or their friends.
Mm-hmm.
Once you started practicing, did that continue, or I guess the question is sort of, were you able? People always worry about balancing or seeing family or creating life, or how do you do that, and did you have any problems with that?
Some
advice.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of advice I can give. I'm probably the wrong person to be giving advice. Why my wife has stuck with me all these years is a question only she can answer. During the first several years, maybe the first 20 years of my private practice, I worked real hard. And I sacrificed probably more than I should have the time that I could have spent with my wife and my children. And I regret that. But I've got a pretty good relationship with my wife, and I've got a pretty good relationship with my children, and they tell me that they don't hold that against me, so I guess I have to believe them when they say that. But there's some time, but I did spend a lot of time with the kids when they were growing up in my daughter's bobby socks and soccer and all that. I coached the teams and all that kind of stuff. Tried to be there for anything and everything that was in any way significant, but there were a lot of times when I would leave home at dark when everybody was in bed and get home at dark when everybody was in bed. That was not good. And there were some years when I truly was a workaholic, and it was not something that was thought of as bad in those days. You just had to do it because you didn't have any choice. The clients demanded it, and if they didn't get the service, then they'd walk down the street and find somebody that would give it to them. So I changed that after a while, and I changed it considerably when I left the practice. I'm much more now in control of my own schedule, and while I'm still working pretty hard, I'm not doing nearly the kind of putting in nearly the kind of time that I was when I was practicing privately.
I want to move into from practice to judging in a second, but I want to follow up a question on what you just said. Do you think that young lawyers have to those 20 years that you were putting in that time, do you think that that's just what you have to do, or do you think times have changed, or do you think it depends on the individual?
I think it depends on the individual and the circumstance in which the individual finds him or herself. Some people make a vow to themselves when they start practicing that my office hours are from X to Y, and that's it. And if I can't get it done between X and Y, it won't get done, and I won't take the business, and I'm going to make less money, and I'm not going to worry if the clients leave. And there's nothing wrong with that decision. And some lawyers say, I will do what I have to do to service my clients, and I'm willing to sacrifice some of myself to do that because I think it's important professionally and maybe personally. Maybe it's something that is an ego thing with some people, or it's just the type A personality is going to hard charge and do more than probably they should for their own health. I don't know where to draw that line. And I certainly, as I said before, I'm probably not the person to be giving advice on that. But each individual has to do what they feel is best for themselves. And just make sure that as we go through life, we enjoy every part of it. This is a one-way ticket. We don't get to come through here again. And we have to make sure that if things are important to us, we pay attention to them. That includes a spouse, a significant other, children, church, family, whatever's important to you. If it's hiking or bird watching or going to a ball game, any of those things. You have to do what's important.
One more question about that. Do you think that you can tell, I mean, is there a difference? Can you tell when people are in front of you whether they're the workaholic type or the I've made time for my family, and do you think that there's a difference in the quality of the work or is it, I mean, can you do the best you can and still have a value system where you choose to spend time with your family, or is that impossible?
I don't think that it's possible to tell just looking at a person's written product or listening to them speak whether they work 20 hours a day or 4 hours a day, because you don't know whether they're working on just this matter or this matter in conjunction with a zillion others. So I don't think that's any kind of a test. I'm sure there are people who work extremely hard who present written product and oral argument to us that are not very good, and there are people who try to make sure that their work fits within their other life and that they have a life and they present very good work. So, and there's the converse of that also. I think people that spend the appropriate amount of time on their legal work will do a good job. And that doesn't mean that they have to spend all day and all night doing it. Sometimes you have to, but you also then can make up for that by taking some time and doing other things.
That's nice. All right. How did you move from practice to judging? And my other question is, did you always want to be a judge, or did it?
Never gave it a thought. I had no interest or desire in being a judge of any kind ever. As a matter of fact, during the 90s, a couple of my partners indicated that they were going to apply for judgeships and did. And none of them were successful. And I was kind of ambivalent about my thought process, because I had kind of grown up in this law firm culture where the firm was the place where it was kind of our second home. And so I felt, gee, these people are kind of bailing out on us. That coupled with the thought of, boy, it'd be really neat for them to get that, because they deserve it, they're good, they do a good job. So I was a little conflicted about that, so I never really thought about it myself in those terms. And in the, I think it was December of 1996, Joe Livermore, who was on the Court of Appeals Division II, announced his retirement. And his position was advertised basically for people who wanted to apply. And I kind of looked around at what I was doing in the practice and what my life was like, and what that court was like, and figured if I'm ever going to do anything different, professionally, that's probably what I would want to do. And this is probably the only opportunity I'm going to have to take a whack at it, so why not? So I did. I made the application. Unfortunately, I also came down with a kidney stone during that process and was almost unable to get the application filed because I was just physically not able to get done what I had to get done. But I managed to get that accomplished. And it was a process that didn't particularly concern me, because I figured I was in a no-lose situation. If I was unsuccessful in the quest for the judicial position, the worst thing that would happen to me was that I would get to stay with my friends and partners and practice law with the folks I liked and work for the clients that I always had and enjoyed. So that wasn't so bad. And then if I actually was chosen to be on the court, then that was good too, because that's a change for the good, I think. And I think it has been. So the process itself didn't particularly concern me. And it went pretty quickly, and I was fortunate enough to be selected.
And was it a big change? I mean, how?
It was a very big change. I had really no idea what I was going to be in for. I had talked to a couple of the judges who are now my colleagues about what they did and what it was like, but it's hard to really get an understanding of that without being in harness and actually doing the job. So I didn't really know what it was going to be like and what the change would really be. But it was an enormous change. For 30 years I wore a suit, a tie, and so forth to work just about every day. And I spent a lot of my time counseling clients, a lot of my time fighting with lawyers and judges, litigating things, arguing, negotiating. And I don't have to do that anymore. The only people I have to negotiate with are my colleagues, and we're pretty amiable. And the stress of having to deal with unreasonable judges setting impossible deadlines, and fax machines chattering in your ear, delivering documents to you that your client wants you to look at yesterday, and lawyers banging on your ear demanding things that you know you can't deliver. I don't have to deal with any of that anymore, nor do I have to deal with the economic realities of a law firm of some size. I don't have to worry about my clients being upset with me because I actually charge them for working for them and expect them to pay me. Nor do I have to try and collect bills. I don't have to deal with personnel issues within a law firm, some of which can be fractious. So the stress level that at least in my individual circumstance, has gone from the top of the Empire State Building to the basement, and that has been wonderful. I don't know if I'll live any longer. I don't know if I will necessarily sleep better, although I probably sleep some better, but I don't sleep any more than I did. So that has been probably the single greatest benefit, I think, of making the change for me personally.
Okay, I want to ask you a couple more things about being a judge, and then I want to ask you, if that's okay, if we can run over just 5 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, good. So what is your day like now as a judge? Does it vary, or is it pretty set?
Well, we have certain days of the week that we hear oral argument. We have one day a week when we conference the cases, and among the panel, we sit in panels of 3 on the Court of Appeals, and we make decisions as a group, and it takes at least 2 people to make a decision. So we meet once a week and go over the cases that are ripe for decision, and that occupies part of one day, and the rest of the time when we're not in argument, and we don't have a lot of arguments, which is kind of unfortunate, is spent reading and writing and talking to law clerks and other judges. And so it's every day is pretty much the same. I I get in there, I see what I've got to do, and I start going through briefs and draft decisions and all manner of things that need attention, and just do it daily.
And how
Pretty mundane.
It sounds nice. How is your style as a lawyer different from your style as a judge? Is it the same?
I'm not sure that there's much of a translation, to tell you the truth. I don't know what my style as a lawyer was. I think you'd probably have to ask the people that I practiced with to get a better idea. All I know is what I did and what I tried to do. And I tried to do the best I could for my clients and to do the right thing and to get their matters taken care of in their best interest. Now my job is to try and decide the cases the best I know how, to be fair and to do the right thing. Follow the law. And where there is no law to follow, try and figure out what it ought to be.
Were there certain qualities that, I don't know if you're going to want to answer this question or not, you don't have to. Were there certain qualities about judges that you hated or that you really loved that you decided that you were going to make sure that you did things a certain way or that you didn't do them from your own experience?
Well, one of the things that I consciously tried to do, and I don't know that I've been able to do it or not, again, you'd have to ask those who deal with me as a judge, is to remember that lawyers have a lot of pressure.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, excuse me.
All right. Lawyers have a tough job, and I try as a judge to not make it any more difficult. But at the same time, the lawyers are representing clients who have matters that demand resolution. And the longer it takes to resolve them, the more difficult it is to process the case. It's not fair to the clients to drag things out, so I try to make sure that lawyers, within reason, respond to the needs of the court. And the court has its own needs. We have a steady diet of cases that keep coming in the door, and so we don't have any choice but to push them out the other end as quickly as we can while making the best decision we can. So we can't have a bunch of cases clogging up in the middle because lawyers either won't or can't do some things. I just recently had to threaten to confine a lawyer to his office until he got a brief done. I didn't have to do it, but he got the brief in before I had to deal with that. I've had to put a court reporter in jail so that the transcripts of trials of criminal defendants who were waiting to have their appeals heard would be prepared so that the appeals could be processed. I didn't like that, and it was a very special circumstance, but I do what I think I have to do in order to protect the rights of the people that are, whose matters we have to decide. I don't do it for my benefit, I'm doing it for their benefit. I'm going to be there all year, so it doesn't make any difference to me whose matter I deal with, but I just want to make sure that nobody is being disadvantaged because counsel is not paying attention to business or some other part of the system is letting the litigant down.
Interesting. Okay, one more silly question, two silly questions. Vacation. Do you get to choose when you go on vacation, or do you have to schedule it really far in advance as a judge, or how does that work? Or no vacation?
I steal vacation whenever I can, and I try to coordinate with my colleagues to make sure that the matters that need to be taken care of are taken care of. Mm-hmm. And we all try to do that, and we all try and accommodate each other. I take a lot more vacation now than I used to. And that's because I didn't take very much before. And I try to take advantage of the flexible time that I have. I can start work whenever I want, and I can quit whenever I want, and I can work at night, and I can work on the weekends, and I don't have to walk to anybody else's beat. So the flexibility makes it a little bit easier to take some time off here and there rather than always having to be in the office so I can answer the phone and talk to my clients or be in court or go to meetings and things like that.
Okay, here's the last one. The silly question, I'll get to the other one. We've asked a lot of people this, you can do it as a lawyer or as a judge, one of your happiest moments. What is to you a happy moment as being a judge?